Wars is with us.
In 1999, fans waited eagerly in line for months to buy tickets for The Phantom Menace, the long-awaited first chapter of the Star Wars saga. As opening night came closer and closer, an interesting phenomenon occurred. Aficionados of Star Trek showed up to harass the Star Wars fans. This incident was the result of an ongoing comparison and competition between the two biggest money-making franchises in the world of science fiction. For years, fans have been debating the merits of their favorite fantasy sagas, pointing out what makes their space opera the better choice. As a result, Star Wars and Star Trek have become embroiled in a continuing battle for merchandise sales, publicity, and box office receipts, leading them to confront one another in this intergalactic installment of Hollywood Rivals. Fandom is an interesting phenomenon that seems to generate the most frenzied followers around fantasy genres. Fan interest in comic books, horror movies, and science fiction has led to regular conventions all over the world where those who share similar interests meet to talk and debate.
To the fact that dreams can come true. Thank you.
The Star Wars film and its sequels have developed an unbelievable following of fans, many of whom were affected by the movie when they were children.
The world at that time is already big, you know, and it's so big to you as a kid. And for Lucas to go and to create this whole world that really was just a whole other world, you really believed it at that age.
No one was more surprised by this phenomenon than the film's creator himself, George Lucas.
It's amazing what's happened in terms of the way this has permeated the culture.
Likewise, Star Trek has developed its own determined fan base.
They're really crazy, they're just mad for that.
Live long and prosper.
They call them Trekkies, yeah. Follow the Treks, follow the Trekkies.
Actors who have appeared even as a guest star in the Star Trek universe find Trekkies usually remember that role and know little of their other screen work.
It's very interesting when you're shopping at the mall and then someone stops and they do a double take and then they talk to their friend and go, that's the woman, she was Utah. She was trying to, and then he tried to kill her and it was so sad. And they're like telling the whole story and it's almost like I'm not there. It's like I'm a poster or something, you know, and I'm like, hi, yeah, hello, you know, I'm real here, I'm a real person. But it's very strange. They almost look at you as if you're still on the screen.
Other stars capitalize on the popularity by making personal appearances at the conventions. But they have to be ready to answer questions about the show, for fans insist on treating these fictional universes as fact.
Every conceivable question that you can think of, they have asked and want an answer for, and want it now, want it amusing. It's thrilling and tantalizing.
Cynics delight in poking fun at the obsessiveness of sci-fi fans as they dress up like their favorite characters or debate over thrust power of a Millennium Falcon.
You do not yet know your powers on the dark side. Come with me and we will take the Emperor down. He has foreseen it.
Perhaps these cynics have just lost the child within and are unable to embrace the joys that fantasy films and television shows provide.
It's just a phone.
R2-D2, where are you?
Or maybe they're just seeing the darker side of fandom, the territorial aspect which leads into bitter rivalry, like the one between Star Wars and Star Trek. Trekkies and Star Warriors continue to fight and argue over which is better. An answer is not easy in coming, but an exploration into each of these star fields will shed some light onto why these two cultural phenomena have divided fans down the middle.
Enterprise log, Captain James Kirk commanding.
Star Trek was the first on the scene, debuting as an NBC television series in 1966.
Behind us, Earth, Mars, Venus.
Like its later rival, Star Wars, Star Trek stemmed from the imagination of one man, in this case, Gene Roddenberry. A former police officer, pilot, and crash investigator, Roddenberry saw the potential of the new medium of television and knew there would be a need for talented writers and producers. He served as head writer on the series Have Gun, Will Travel, then created and produced a show called The Lieutenant, starring Gary Lockwood.
I liked Roddenberry. He was a real character. People have written a lot of things about him, you know,
I never say any of those things. I feel I owe him that in his grave. But Roddenberry was a good man. He had been a character in his life, airplane pilot, cop. He was a hell of a guy.
Gene next created the sci-fi show Star Trek, doing the pilot and eventual series at Desilu, the studio run by Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball. The first pilot starred Jeffrey Hunter as Captain Pike of the USS Enterprise, but was deemed too cerebral by NBC. So a second pilot was produced, this time with William Shatner as Captain James T. Kirk. Shatner's career would take off thanks to the show, and he would play off his image of Kirk for years to come.
Scotty, beam us up! Scotty! Scotty! Don't worry, Captain.
Later, co-stars and fellow actors would complain that he was temperamental and difficult to get along with, though there were those with dissenting opinions.
We had the best time. We had lots of fun. He was a good kisser. I hear that a lot of people don't like his temperament. But I like the fact that we just did a layout for TV Guide. I don't know if you saw it, for the 30th anniversary. And they said, look, he's coming in at 11, be ready, be camera ready, he's coming in, he's got to get to a lunch. I like that. I like to know exactly where people are. It doesn't keep me having to guess. And I like people that do that tell you exactly what they want, where they've been, where they're going.
Probing the unknown reaches of space. Star Trek.
This time around, the series sold, and Star Trek was blasting off into television history. The premise of the show reflected Roddenberry's liberal views and his visions of a better world to come. In the future, Earth is part of a united federation of planets that peacefully explores the universe. The Starship Enterprise, overseen by Captain Kirk, is part of a 5-year mission to seek out new life and new civilizations. Other crew members included Science Officer Spock, whose mother was human, but whose father hailed from the planet Vulcan. The extremely intelligent Vulcans had no emotions, but Spock, being a hybrid, found throughout the series that he did indeed possess feelings, and had to come to terms with them. Spock quickly became an audience favorite, thanks to his confusion over emotions, but also due to an interesting part of his anatomy, his pointed ears. Actor Leonard Nimoy portrayed the famous Vulcan, but later found himself typecast after the series ended. Other crew members included DeForest Kelley as ship's Dr. Bones McCoy, James Doohan as Chief Engineer Scotty, George Takei as Helmsman Sulu, and Walter Koenig as Navigator Chekhov. Nichelle Nichols portrayed Communications Officer Lieutenant Uhura, and in one memorable episode shared television's first interracial kiss with William Shatner. Altogether, the cast seemed to have a good time, as these bloopers attest.
I'll get it. Just a moment. Just a moment. I'll have it in a second. Kirk here. Spock here.
With strong stories and themes of tolerance and acceptance, as well as aliens of all shapes and sizes, Star Trek produced many memorable episodes. One of these was City on the Edge of Forever, where the crew travels back in time to the 1930s. There, Kirk falls for guest star Joan Collins, who is destined to die. Unable to alter history, he must watch her perish in one of the series' saddest moments. The Enemy Within found Kirk split into two beings, a good Kirk and an evil Kirk, the latter of which spends his time menacing his fellow crew members. The Trouble with Tribbles had the Enterprise overrun by little furry alien puffballs, which multiplied faster than rabbits. While another memorable entry found guest star Michael Forrest menacing the crew as Apollo.
That show has probably brought me more attention than any other thing I've ever done.
Fans seemed to really like entries where the Klingons appeared. They were a war-loving alien race who later surfaced in the Star Trek films. Just about anyone could pop up on an episode of Trek, including memorable guest stars Roger C. Carmel, Frank Gorshin, and Jill Ireland.
But I played a woman from another planet, and on this planet they had these pods. And if you burst a pod, the person became, really kind of high. And I kept bursting pods under Leonard's nose, and was madly in love with me. And then he took me back to the starship, I think, as I can recall, and I didn't have any more pods, and he fell out of love with me. And, oh, I cried.
Celeste Yarnell was another Trek visitor, playing a liberated female member of the crew.
And what was so terrific about my episode and my role on Star Trek, I played the yeoman Martha Landon in The Apple, was that I was truly one of the first liberated women. I don't know if you remember the fight scene where I kicked a little you-know-what and wasn't there delivering coffee, which had been the stereotypical role of women in business. So I was really a member of the crew, and it was just great. I had a ball on that show.
Unlike Star Wars, Star Trek was not an immediate hit, and after 2 seasons, the network wanted to cancel the show. According to Hollywood legend, it was the large number of letters from fans that convinced NBC to go for another year.
That's a good legend, and that should never be, one should never stop that story. The truth is somewhere in between, I suppose.
Whatever the reasons, Star Trek lasted 1 more season before finally disappearing into the black hole of cancellation.
Don't miss Star Trek in color.
Then, something amazing happened. The show became a huge success when reruns began to be shown in the alternate universe of syndication.
I think the independent stations, when they got it for syndication, slotted it earlier, made it an earlier time, put it on at an earlier hour, and I think that picked up a large segment of the audience. And then I think it built on reputation, word of mouth, and people began to watch it. And it's phenomenal. It's increased in popularity. I think it still is increasing. There's a second generation out there who are watching Star Trek 10 years after it was filmed. I don't understand it. I don't know why. I fully appreciate it, but it's a mystery to me, too.
Star Trek became a cult phenomenon as new fans embraced the show. It was considered television science fiction at its most cerebral, with intelligent plots and well-thought-out themes.
Ultimately, I think it was well done and had good stories, told good stories. So I think it was good entertainment, and it cut across all the demographic lines.
Just as Star Wars would produce a merchandising explosion, Star Trek toys and memorabilia of all kinds appeared in stores, eagerly bought up by children of all ages. Fans of the show began calling themselves Trekkies and made icons out of Kirk, Spock, Bones, and the rest. Even guest stars discovered they were in demand as they were asked to attend conventions dedicated solely to the show.
I used to do a lot of the conventions that they have on the Star Trek. I played Kang, the Klingon. And I played him in the original series, and then they brought us back later. I don't know if you know that. They brought us back the 3 Klingons later, and the makeup changed drastically. I don't know if you recall that, but originally it was just makeup. And when we came back many years later, the 3 of us, Bill Campbell, myself, and Calicos, played the 3 Klingons. Everything changed. The putty on the head, and the hair went back, and everything was more grotesque. And I kept saying, well, why do these Klingons change? Aren't they just normal aging and all? So, well, they live to be 200 or 300, the producers, they live to be 200 or 300 years old, and the body takes on these chemical, biological changes, and that was a difference in the looks. That's what they gave me, so we accepted it, and that's what we did.
And boldly go where no one has gone before.
The interest in the show has never disappeared. The original cast even found themselves attending a dedication of a Star Trek exhibit at the Smithsonian Institute. For years, there was also talk of bringing the cast back for a made-for-television reunion movie, but nothing ever came of it. But something came about in 1977 that would bring back science fiction with a vengeance and establish fictional worlds and strong fan bases to rival Gene Roddenberry's vision.
62.
George Lucas, who had previously directed the hit film American Graffiti, a comedic and nostalgic look at the 50s, wanted to resurrect the character of Flash Gordon using state-of-the-art special effects.
It's one of the Death Squadron right on our tail.
But he could not obtain the rights to the character, so he fashioned a 9-part space opera of his own.
You got him, Flash. Direct hit.
The first film, Star Wars, is actually part 4 of his vision, but still served to introduce his fantasy worlds to a hungry audience of young people. The movie is a simple story of good versus evil, set in a galaxy far, far away, and based on the sci-fi serials of yesteryear. Lucas was also inspired by Joseph Campbell's studies in mythology, as well as the fiction of Edgar Rice Burroughs. A young boy, Luke Skywalker, played by Mark Hamill, is taught to use a mystical source of Zen-like power called the Force to defeat the menacing Darth Vader, who holds sway over an empire of alien worlds. Like Star Trek, Star Wars was populated by all kinds of interesting characters and crazy creatures, many of which found their inspirations in the most unlikely places. Carrie Fisher, daughter of Debbie Reynolds and Eddie Fisher, portrayed the beautiful Princess Leia, whose request for help sparks off the film's plot. There was also Harrison Ford as rogue adventurer Han Solo, the pilot of the Millennium Falcon, and this role catapulted the actor to superstardom.
I thought if it was successful, I would have more opportunities than I'd had before, sure. But I had no idea of the order of success. You don't sit around imagining a success of that nature.
Han Solo's co-pilot was a large, furry beast named Chewbacca. Hailing from a race of Wookiees, Chewie's look resembled the werewolves, gorillas, and abominable snowmen of past horror movies. Two of the most popular characters were the robots, or droids, who accompanied the heroes on their missions. C-3PO and R2-D2 are always a part of the action, but their main function is to provide comic relief, kind of like a cosmic Abbott and Costello.
I hereby claim Mars in the name of the United States of America. Me too.
C-3PO is the taller, golden robot with a stilted style of walking and a whining voice.
R2-D2, where are you?
Always complaining about the predicaments he is in. This droid's look was based on the robot from Metropolis and played by English actor Anthony Daniels.
Most people, I think, probably realize that the costume is completely solid. Some people get the impression that the face is makeup, that it's a mobile face. And indeed, if you took the mask off, you would find I was doing all the emotions. They're all happening, but there is a mask in front of it. I, for a time, tried doing it just with a blank face. It doesn't work. I'm acting away. The fact that it comes through the mask is because I suppose I'm overacting enough for that to happen.
The smaller droid, who looks like a cross between a trash can and a jukebox, is the braver and probably the smarter of the two robots.
I've always liked R2 because I understood him, maybe because he didn't talk.
R2-D2 remains the only character in the history of motion pictures who can make beeps and boops sound sarcastic. Together, the duo was based partly on characters from Akira Kurosawa's film The Hidden Fortress, while their personalities were inspired by the robots in Silent Running.
Meet the almost human drones, amazing companions on a journey beyond the stars.
The man has a full house and he knew it. Now how about that?
Of course, every good space opera needs a bad guy, and Darth Vader was probably the most villainous of all. Resembling Marvel Comics' own Doctor Doom, the masked leader in black was voiced by James Earl Jones, while British bodybuilder Dave Prowse filled in the suit.
I was up at Glamis Castle filming, and the public relations people came up and they said, "We can't understand why it is that wherever you go, you're surrounded by kids." And I said, "Well, it's Darth Vader, isn't it?" And they said, "Well, what do you mean it's Darth Vader?" And I said, "Well, I'm Darth Vader from Star Wars." And they said, "We didn't know that. Can we do an interview with you?" So I did this great big long interview.
Star Wars was a mega hit, a blockbuster, and the whole world went crazy for it. Fans saw the film again and again as it broke box office records, becoming a movie phenomenon the likes of which had never before been seen. It even surpassed Star Trek in popularity and merchandising.
The original toy line for Star Wars was the most produced toy line of all time. And with now a resurgence of the new films, there is a resurgence for new toys on Star Wars. There's all new product lines pertaining to Star Wars now, collectibles, toys, dolls, and a lot of other things available.
Star Wars was everywhere, on every product imaginable, in magazines and comic books, and talked about and discussed by every kid in America.
Yeah, it's amazing what's happened in terms of the way this has permeated culture.
Like their Star Trek predecessors, actors like Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, and Carrie Fisher all found themselves superstars, identified with their characters no matter where they went. Naturally, with the success of Star Wars, Hollywood jumped on the bandwagon, and a slew of science fiction films hit theaters in the next couple years. There was Battle Beyond the Stars.
A battle that ends in a desperate gamble.
And Star Crash. Some of these even became television series, like Battlestar Galactica and Buck Rogers.
Now, Captain, let's go home.
Who can save you now?
Flash Gordon, the project Lucas originally wanted to develop, was now rushed back into theaters thanks to the success of Star Wars. But this new version, despite a soundtrack from the rock group Queen, tanked at the box office. There was also one other film that appeared in the wake of Star Wars, one that had been originally conceived as a made-for-television project.
The human adventure.
Star Trek, the motion picture.
The motion picture.
This is where the rivalry really heats up. It's pretty much accepted as fact that the success of Star Wars launched a feature film version of Star Trek.
I think the advent of Star Wars and Close Encounters and the large grosses there opened everybody's eyes up at Paramount. That's my guess, and they decided to go with a big motion picture. It's now huge motion picture. It's vast in concept and special effects.
But the film's director, Robert Wise, felt George Lucas's picture had nothing to do with the development of the new feature.
I liked the whole idea, and I wasn't influenced at all by Star Wars, what they're doing. We had our own story, our own script, and of the Trekkies and whatnot. So I just took the script and went out and made it.
Producers behind Star Trek, the motion picture, were happy to reunite the original cast. Even Leonard Nimoy, who at first balked at returning to the role of Spock. But they had to make the feature film different from the series. In other words, it had to be big.
It's an epic motion picture that Star Trek is.
The plot dealt with a powerful and destructive entity threatening the Earth and forcing James T. Kirk, now promoted to Admiral, to assume command of the Enterprise and confront the menace. Though the story tied into the real-life Voyager spacecraft, the film was received with disappointment by the fans who just expected more. Not helping were the problems that plagued the production.
It was not one of my unfavorite experiences. Not working on the set with the actors and doing that was all fine. They were all great, we're good friends and got along well. It was just the fact that we were rewriting the script all the way through. The studio had the actors, when they decided, it first been developed as kind of a big film for TV, and they decided to make a feature out of it. They had the actors on payroll, and finally they said, look, we can't keep paying these guys forever, so you got to start August 1st or whatever it was. Well, we only had the first act of the script in proper shape, so we were rewriting all the way through. Till the last few days, I was getting 2 or 3 sets of rewrites for the next day's work during the course of the day. They changed. It was no way to work.
Star Trek, the motion picture, was successful enough to launch a series of sequels, but just could not match its big screen inspiration and rival, Star Wars. Fans of George Lucas's epic demanded the return of their favorite characters, and Lucas, happy to continue his envisioned epic, gladly complied.
I'm George Lucas. Welcome to Star Wars.
The Empire Strikes Back hit theaters in 1980, with Lucas passing the directorial reins to Irvin Kershner. Once again, 20th Century Fox had another blockbuster on their hands, one that was also well received by critics, who considered it better than the first film.
people seem to like Empire and Jedi maybe a little better because the story has evolved more by that time. The characters are more evolved and you know more about them, so maybe you started to care more about them. So probably the later two movies. My favorite would probably be Empire Strikes Back, the second film.
Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, Han Solo, Darth Vader, and the rest of the gang return for the new adventure, but with one difference. The actors who played the parts, unknowns when making Star Wars, were now superstars, and they went all out to promote their latest film.
Well, you have the opportunity in this one to complex those character relationships, and it is more interesting as an actor, but I didn't have any trouble enjoying myself on the first one either.
Well, the characters are much more developed, the relationships between the characters, you get to know them better.
Yeah.
So it's a much denser film. It's much, there's much more story, new characters introduced, new planets.
As well as the original cast, Empire introduced new characters such as galactic bounty hunter Boba Fett, wise sage Yoda, a Muppet-like creature performed by Frank Oz, and an old friend of Han Solo's named Lando Calrissian, who may or may not be in league with Darth Vader.
I like Lando because he's charming. I think I'm rather charming.
Humble.
Humble. No, he's charming, cavalier. He's a bit of a rogue, which is all very interesting. It makes for an interesting character, and it creates surprises. He's unpredictable. You don't know what he's going to do from moment to moment, and then at some point you see where he really is.
At the end of the universe lies the beginning of vengeance.
Like Empire, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, was a bigger financial and critical success than Star Trek the Motion Picture.
I think it's more in the mainstream of the best of Star Trek. The first Star Trek movie was a departure. It was a special kind of study of an idea, less of an adventure, less use of the characters, the individuals in the show itself, and more of the ship on a deep space voyage looking for the answer to an interesting philosophical question. This movie, I think, is going to much more successfully capture the essence of what most Star Trek followers enjoy in Star Trek.
I'll chase him round the moons of Nibia and round...
The screenwriters returned to a classic episode from the series called Space Seed, which featured guest star Ricardo Montalban as the villainous Khan.
There she is.
They even had an eager Montalban reprise the role for the film. However, the picture ended on a sad note.
Shield collapsing, Captain.
Leonard Nimoy wanted to finally distance himself from the role of Mr. Spock, so the beloved Vulcan heroically dies at the end of the film.
Evade the starboard.
Scotty, I need warp speed.
1 year after Star Trek II, in 1983, Fox released the next installment in the Star Wars series, Return of the Jedi, which promised to tie up all the loose ends left from Empire's cliffhanger ending. This time around, director Richard Marquand was brought in to oversee the production.
Well, it's quite a challenge to follow those two acts, there's no doubt. Two of the biggest movies of all time, two movies that really have set a tremendous tradition, set up an enormous mythology in the minds of an audience. Coming to the third one, you're obviously aware of the fact that you're the third one along the line and the third soldier through the gap is the one that gets hit. And that kind of thing is in your mind. But on the other hand, the story itself of Return of the Jedi is so strong, and the strings that have come through Star Wars are so important that, in fact, I was able to come to the movie with a lot of confidence.
Return was still another blockbuster, as if anyone expected anything less, and featured the final battle between Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, who had previously been revealed to be Luke's own father. Boasting even more spectacular effects, many fans were nevertheless disappointed, especially by all the screen time spent on a race of cute, furry creatures dubbed the Ewoks. Still, the public turned out in droves to see the film, which they thought was Lucas's farewell to the world of Star Wars. Meanwhile, the Trekkies anxiously awaited the next installment of the Star Trek series.
Stardate 8097.3. Now, Mr. Scott.
Leonard Nimoy this time went behind the cameras and agreed to direct. He also agreed to return on screen as his Vulcan character, and the third installment was titled Star Trek III: The Search for Spock.
Join the search. Star Trek III: The Search for Spock.
I did it when I did it because I really was looking for a new challenge. And I don't know if you recall, but at the end of Star Trek II, Spock had died. And now they wanted to make another Star Trek movie. And they thought, well, gee, we'd like to have Mr. Spock back again. So they called me and they said, well, you know, I had said goodbye to the whole thing. I thought it's over, it's done. And I was wrong, of course, but when they called, I thought, well, what do I want to do here? I think we've done this. We've done the Spock character. Yeah, it'll be interesting to bring him back and see what it's like to start all over again, kind of fresh with this character.
We're going to attempt time travel. Sulu, take us home.
Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home followed, with Nimoy once again at the helm as director editor.
Judging by the pollution content of the atmosphere, I believe we have arrived at the latter half of the 20th century.
Stardate 1986. San Francisco.
James T. Kirk was reduced in rank back to captain in this one, returning to lead the Enterprise crew at the film's conclusion.
You look like a cadet review.
In this entry, an alien presence threatens to destroy the Earth because it does not detect the intelligent life it had come across years earlier, the long-extinct whale. So the Star Trek crew travels back in time to San Francisco of 1986 to bring two whales back to the future.
Steady, hold on tight, lassie.
The presence of these characters in our time led to some marvelous comic scenes and made Star Trek IV a favorite for many.
I like getting laughs. I like entertaining and being funny. But I never got a chance to do it in TV or movies until really Star Trek IV, I think, was the first time that we made a conscious decision and said, let's lighten up here. We've been dealing with death and destruction and dying and all this funerals and stuff, you know. Time to lighten up and have a good time. So we made a conscious effort to do it, and it started to evolve into that. And now, suddenly, I would say 50, 75% of the scripts that I'm offered are comedies.
Once we kidnap the princess, we can force her father, King Roland, to give us the combination to the air shield, thereby destroying planet Druidia and saving planet Spaceball. Everybody got that?
While the Star Trek series received the humorous touch, 1987 saw Star Wars the target of a laugh-out-loud satire. Funny man Mel Brooks spoofed the visions of George Lucas with his manic comedy Spaceballs, which starred Bill Pullman, John Candy, and Rick Moranis as Dark Helmet.
Lone Star.
Spaceballs did not match the laugh quotient or box office success of previous Brooks films, like Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein, though it was a funny tribute to sci-fi's most enduring picture. The problem was it came too late. Most fans felt it was released too long after Star Wars for the jokes to be timely or relevant.
When does this happen in the movie? Give me Bob!
Spaceballs, the movie.
How do I know you're not making faces at me under that thing?
Star Trek V: The Final Frontier appeared in 1989, with the Enterprise hijacked by Spock's half-brother in order to search for the most cosmic being of all, God himself. Leonard Nimoy passed over the directorial reins to William Shatner this time around.
I had an idea for a story that was stimulated by things in my life, and I knew the mode to tell it was in this form, Star Trek form, which is one of a company of people who are forced together over long periods of time, react and interact. But there is this goal, this thing that they have to do. It's just a means of telling it, and the means of telling it is through this group of people who are know each other so well.
An interesting fan comment on the Internet Movie Database referred to the film as Kirk versus God. Don't bet on God. Nicholas Meyer directed Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, in 1991, the final film to feature the full original Enterprise crew. This time around, a peace treaty between the Klingons and the Federation is being hammered out, with Kirk and company sent to aid in the negotiations. But after a high-ranking Klingon official is assassinated, Kirk and Bones McCoy are accused of the crime and sent to a prison work camp on a frozen planet. While the 3 Star Wars movies remained a fine trilogy of films, the Star Trek series of features seemed to be more hit and miss. Fans joke that the even-numbered entries always seem to be better than the odd numbers. But in one area, Star Trek always topped its rival Star Wars: television. Star Wars never quite made any impression on the small screen, though a 1978 Christmas special remains a fan favorite. No live-action series was ever attempted, though there were some made-for-TV movies featuring the Ewoks. The furry creatures also had their own cartoon series in 1985, as did C-3PO and R2-D2, who starred in the animated Saturday morning show, Droid. Star Trek also had a short-lived cartoon series in 1973, which featured the voices of many of the original cast members. But the property's true triumphant return to television came in 1987, with a series that featured all new characters. Overseen by Gene Roddenberry, Star Trek: The Next Generation followed the crew of the Enterprise on their continuing mission to explore new worlds.
Welcome to the Enterprise.
The new crew featured Patrick Stewart as Jean-Luc Picard, the chrome-domed captain who, like his predecessor William Shatner, became a superstar thanks to the role.
Let's see what's out there.
Jonathan Frakes, who later proved to be a talented director on Generation features, co-starred as Commander Riker, while Brent Spiner became a fan favorite, playing the ship's android Data, who, like Spock, had to learn about human emotions. Other actors on the series included Gates McFadden as the ship's doctor, LeVar Burton as the blind chief engineer, Will Wheaton as the crew's youngest member, and Michael Dorn as a Klingon lieutenant. Yes, in this politically correct climate, the universe was actually more peaceful, and even the warrior Klingon race had embraced less violent pursuits.
For many years, everybody is trying to make him softer and more lovable, and I've been trying my best to keep him kind of harsh and gruff and surly and, you know, trying to true to his original nature. I mean, I like to see his changes, but it's difficult at times.
But this isn't to say the new crew didn't have its share of trouble.
Their continuing mission to boldly go where no one has gone before.
New alien races came to cause havoc, including the Borg, a collective of single-minded creatures who take over and assimilate all they come into contact with, which in one memorable episode included Captain Picard.
An uncertain future confronts the next generation.
The show was a huge hit and won a new generation of fans. Fans who were delighted when actors like Leonard Nimoy and James Doohan made guest appearances playing their characters from the original series.
Spock.
I think they're very fortunate that they followed after us because they're also very good, you know. But we started the whole thing.
So successful was The Next Generation that 2 more series followed, each with their own unique twist on the Star Trek mythos. Star Trek Deep Space Nine was about a Federation space station guarding the galaxy's first stable wormhole and featured a whole new cast of characters and creatures. It ran from 1993 until 1999. In 1995, fans were treated to another new series, Star Trek Voyager. This show focused on a Federation starship lost in an uncharted area of the galaxy, with its crew desperately trying to find a way home. It starred Kate Mulgrew as the first female starship captain, and Tim Russ as the Vulcan member of the crew.
The Voyager is set out in a part of space that is completely uncharted. No humans have ever been there before. So we're exploring uncharted space and discovering all kinds of new phenomenon and new kinds of civilizations and cultures. So every week we can discover something new, which is really kind of exciting.
Interest in the Star Wars films never flagged.
The Force is with us every day.
And rumors that George Lucas was going to produce the remaining 6 episodes of his epic continued to proliferate. To tantalize fans and to see how much interest there really was, Lucas returned to the original 3 films in the late 1990s.
Been a lot of fan enthusiasm, a lot of people really interested in seeing the film the way it should be seen on the big screen.
Special effects technology had advanced to new heights, so the films were digitally cleaned up. New scenes were added, old scenes restored, and the entire trilogy was re-released into theaters nationwide.
Well, we've added a scene between Harrison Ford and Jabba the Hutt, which is kind of neat in that we weren't able to get Jabba ever to move in the old films, but now he can move around and walk and things. And then we have a new entrance into Mos Eisley, which makes it into a city instead of a little, backwater town, which it was meant to be a city. And we have things coming up later in the other films. Jedi in particular, we have a little musical number in there that was a very 10-second musical number before with Cy Snoodles and this Ula, who's the dancer, gets eaten by the big monster, and I think that now that's a 2-minute actual musical number.
Studio executives were nervous. Would audiences respond? As the old saying goes, give the public what they want, and they'll come out in droves.
Well, it was definitely a gamble when we started a year ago. I mean, we didn't know whether we'd even get the theaters to book the film because it's been on television and it's been on video, and this hasn't been done before. So it's a bold experiment, and it's actually gotten a lot more groundswell, a lot more enthusiasm than anybody ever expected.
Then came the moment everyone was waiting for. Fans waited in line months ahead of time in order to be among the first to see The Phantom Menace, the first of the Star Wars prequels.
That's like gold right now, gold.
Though die-hard devotees grumbled about the title, the anticipation and excitement surrounding the new film had never been seen before.
It was a very tight, strict security policy because we didn't want people in there with cameras, and because we wanted to keep the filming not so much a secret, but the story a secret, so that fans and audiences wouldn't be spoiled.
Right.
Liam Neeson was joined in the cast by Ewan McGregor, who played a young Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Jake Lloyd as Anakin Skywalker, the child who would grow up to be Darth Vader.
My guy's the most powerful.
Is your guy, Anakin Skywalker, a young hero that kids could look up to?
Yes, he is.
Natalie Portman made a striking Queen Amidala, wearing stunning costumes and fighting to save her empire.
I think it's really great for people in general to see a young woman at the helm of such an important, in such an important position. She's really smart and cautious and very. She's very good. She's a good person.
Pulp Fiction's Samuel L. Jackson also appeared in a small role, and he relished his opportunity to become a part of the Star Wars universe.
For years and years, I wished I could be in a movie like this, and I kind of semi-campaigned for the job, and I got it. And the enormity of what this means doesn't quite hit you until you show up. So I kind of show up and I get to the studio in London and I walk into my dressing room and, there's my Jedi costume. It's kind of like, oh, okay, all right, I'm here. And I get it on, I look in the mirror and it's like, yes, I'm doing it. Man. And then you get to set and this guy comes over with this huge Halliburton and opens it and says, okay, pick a lightsaber.
The new villain of the film was Darth Maul, an imposing figure who struck the fancy of fans and became the centerpiece of the newest marketing extravaganza.
Darth Maul is the new bad guy, which means he's really the old bad guy.
But for all the new merchandise and all the hoopla, the film turned out to be something of a disappointment. While the effects remained state-of-the-art, many found the storyline to be weak and the overall film lacking in depth and, well, just plain fun, despite producers' claims otherwise.
I think fun describes it better than anything else. And I think it also, in addition to that, I would add, I think it's a celebration of George Lucas's imagination, which is the most bizarre, wonderful, incredible thing to be able to experience on a day-to-day level. He's created something that's so rich and wacky and wild.
Comparisons to the original were inevitable, as fans hoped the experience of seeing the new film would recapture the magic of the first one. In the final analysis, the return of Star Wars to movie screens, despite its boffo box office, just did not match the critical triumph of rival Star Trek's rebirth on television. This was quite clear when Star Trek: The Next Generation ended its run in 1994 and made the jump to movie housing. Star Trek Generations was released that same year, with the cast encountering the misguided villainy of character actor Malcolm McDowell. But fans truly came out to see the much-hyped meeting of Star Trek's two most popular captains, Kirk and Picard. William Shatner reprised his role of James T. Kirk, and fans couldn't wait to see him side by side with Patrick Stewart. But in the end, only one captain walked away alive. Kirk took his final bow as the character was finally laid to rest. The Next Generation cast has proven a hot commodity, and they have starred in 2 more big-budgeted feature films. Star Trek: First Contact had them travel back in time to keep the evil Borg from altering man's first benevolent contact with alien life. And Star Trek: Insurrection found the crew forced to go against Federation orders when the unique population of an alien planet is threatened with extinction.
We're going to attempt time travel. Sulu, take us home.
These films continue to be successful and show no sign of discontinuing in the near future. Most likely, both Star Wars and Star Trek will remain immortal. The second and third entries of the Star Wars series are already underway, and Lucas has assured fans that the final 3 chapters will eventually make it to theaters as well.
I think there's going to be a sequel, I really do.
Each new Star Wars release is an event, drawing huge crowds and top celebrity fans.
It was a cultural phenomenon when it came out. It touched a chord in everybody's lives all around the world.
As for Star Trek, it too will continue to branch out even further. In fact, the Star Trek Experience recently opened up in Las Vegas, giving former cast members another chance to ruminate on the power of Gene Roddenberry's vision.
And here we are 31 years later, and Gene Roddenberry's marvelous, wonderful, fantastic dream of what the future could be like. And here we are realizing it, the whole world.
No doubt the 2 properties will continue to compete as they grow in time and, of course, space. In some ways, they are similar. They've both stemmed from the imagination of a single individual. They both present vast and complex universes filled with creatures of all shapes and sizes. And they both bring back the wonder and excitement of the serials and space operas from yesteryear. As for their differences, they both seem to conquer and thrive in different mediums, Star Trek becoming a part of TV history,
Live long and prosper.
while Star Wars gained movie immortality.
The Force is with us every day.
And Star Wars presents individual forces of good trying to stop an evil empire from taking over, while Star Trek preaches the strength of unity as a federation of planets overcomes lone powers of evil. But in the end, and in both worlds, good always conquers evil. And isn't that what really matters? These 2 fantasies aren't really at odds. They have inspired and built off each other for decades now. Fans can debate all they want, but it all depends on one's personal preference. Either way you lean, there's no denying that Star Wars and Star Trek have changed the face of science fiction and the world for the better. All the while continuing to inspire their fans to place them side by side as true Hollywood rivals.